Let's talk about bows. One of the questions I get asked most often on this channel is what sort of bow do I use? And I'm happy to answer it. My main bow is probably this one. It's a Bows Ghillie Dhu 60 pound. It's got no arrow shelf cut out. Sorry, it's wrapped horribly right now. It's a pretty thing. It's got incredibly recurved carbon fiber limbs, and it is fast. For the draw weight on it, the arrows absolutely fly off this thing. And when I'm doing shots upside down or what have you, it gets a lot of power even at only partial draw because it stacks the weight very, very quickly. So it's probably like 45 pounds around here, and it's still got that far to go. Really, really good short bow. The downside is that speed makes it quite unforgiving in terms of your release and also in terms of your arrow chew. So it can be really hard to get consistently accurate with. It's also not cheap and quite lightweight. So it will pull you around a lot if you're not used to using these kinds of bows. And of course, it's a traditional horsebow, which are harder to use than more modern recurves. Not a beginner bow by any means, and the price reflects that. My second bow is this one. This is by MR Bows. It's a Tiron. It is 126 pounds at 32-inch draw. I'm not always hitting that, I'm not going to lie. It's 101 pounds at 28-inch. The string, incidentally, very pretty rainbow thing by Freelance Archery. But this is very, very fun. Again, no arrow shelf cut out. You can shoot off either side. But again, you got to use traditional techniques, a nice release. Otherwise, you're going to be skipping arrows all over the place. And I often am. I'm trying to work on my Catra to make that easier, but it's powerful. It's faster than a longbow of the same draw weight. And unless you're particularly working on war bows, it is heavy as hell. See? That's a like 30-kilogram bag target, by the way. But the problem is, a lot of the people asking me about this are looking to get a bow of their own. And a lot of the time, the reason they're asking me is because they're not very familiar with the kinds of bows that are available. And neither of these is a good bow if that's the position you're in. Would I recommend them? Yes. If you've shot horse bows, you know you like them, you know you like that traditional style of shooting, and you want to get either a lot of speed or a lot of power, then these are quite good bows to use. I've had a lot of fun with them. But if you are starting out and you're just looking to get a bow to get going with, you don't need to fork out that much. And you probably shouldn't, because you're going to make a lot of mistakes and learn a lot of things about yourself and your technique while you still have your first bow. So when you get your second or third bow, you'll know a lot more, and you might not want one of these. You might want something completely different. You might want to go for a longbow or a compound or a recurve with lots of bells and whistles on it. But if you don't already know exactly what kind of bow you want, and you don't have a specific style that you want to shoot, then you need a beginner bow. And I've just been sent one. This is a Windrunner 68-inch takedown by Mandarin Duck. I haven't shot it before. I'm going to get it out of the bag and show you what beginner bows look like. So this is very different from the kind of bows that I normally use because it's a takedown, which most bows that you use on an archery range in a beginner course or something like that will look very similar to this. You might have one of these. You might have a Samick Sage or something along those lines. These are your starter bows. They're less expensive. They're easier to transport because they take down into multiple pieces. This particular one has a screw attachment, but you don't need a screwdriver or an Allen key. You just open it up like this. There will be a different attachment depending on which kind of bow you have. But generally, you want to screw it in place. Let's pretend I'm quick at this. Don't mind the police sirens. They don't know I'm here. Good, they've gone. Right, here's the bow. The next thing you need is a string, which I think mine's blown away in the wind, so I'm going back for it. Here's the string. Nothing fancy. So once you've got your limbs attached, make sure there's not too much wobble in them. Nice. And then you want to attach your string. So most of the time there'll be one big loop and one smaller loop on the bowstrings. The smaller loop goes on the bottom limb, but before you do that, you want to put the big loop over the top. So it will loop. It wants to sit in this knocking point here, but before that, you have to string it. So you'll take it right the way down. Right the way down. Make sure there's a little bit of a twist in that string so that the fibers will hold together nicely. Loop it on, and voila. This is an unstrung bow. There's no tension in it. It's not ready to shoot right now. So then we string it. I don't want to put the ends of it right down onto the tarmac here because I don't want to put the ends of it right down onto the concrete here. So I'm going to take this into the mud. It will get the end a little bit muddy, but hey. You just put a bit of pressure on the bottom. So your foot comes around, put some pressure on here. You lean your hip into the other bit. You push, and you do that. You make sure there's no grass or anything on the end. That is a bad way to string a bow. That is not what you want to do if you have access to a bow stringer. So give me a minute. A bow stringer is very often a piece of string or something like this, which will have a loop at one end. Comes on the limb past the string, and then at the other end it's got a little pocket which sits over the limb that's got the string already on it. What you do is you stand on your stringer, you lift the bow, and it puts the tension on so that you can just slide the string into place like that, and voila, a nice strung bow. This is a great sort of thing to start with as a beginner because it's got an arrow shelf on it, which means that when you stick your arrow on, yes, this isn't set up yet, but when you stick your arrow on, it lies central rather than having to curve around the riser in the middle like it does with a traditional bow. So it's easier to get accurate with. This one also has attachments all over it for, you can put a sight on it or a bow quiver. It's got a knob on here that you can put a weight on, you know, the kind of big stabilizing weights that they use in Olympic archery. So you could spend a while experimenting with your setup on a bow like this before you figure out how you want to shoot eventually. Speaking of setup, I don't want to shoot the arrows directly off this bit of wood here because it's noisy as hell and it will scratch the finish. So I'm going to put an arrow shelf on it, or an arrow shelf rest. You can get some really nice ones, little like metal things that come in and fit in here and work with something called a clicker to help you get more accurate. But because I'm a gremlin, some of you may not know this about me, but I am, I'm going to use a bit of stick-on felt, tasty, which I'll then have to cut down to size later, but can't be bothered right now for this video, and some Velcro. Honestly, a bit of stick-on Velcro absolutely does the job. Oh, I am going to have to cut it down now because that's going to annoy me. I will be back with some scissors. This is why I'm not allowed to share anybody else's fabric scissors. Chop in the sticky. You know what they say? Cut once, measure twice. But only afterwards. Okay, once you've got this, next thing you want is a knock point. Again, this is something I normally don't bother with when I'm shooting because I speed shoot, but let's do this properly. You can use something like this to figure out whereabouts the arrow is going to sit relative to your string. Or you can eyeball it, which is obviously worse, but who cares? Stick the arrow on your string and try and get it to a right angle. This is not a right angle. That seems marginally more like it. And then you want to stick a knocking point on the string. Sorry, I just stepped on some sticky felt. A knocking point on the string a little bit above where you're going to put that arrow. And again, we could do this properly, but I'm going to use some tape. Oh look, there's a spider on my arrow. Hey, get that away. It's starting to rain and everything. I was going to do some pole after this. Right, there we go. A homemade knocking point. But once you have your bow set up, you need to shoot some arrows. Now these were ones that were sent by Mandarin Duck, so they're their recommended arrows to go with this. And they sent me this lovely pack of 12. They came without the points on, which isn't a huge deal, but if you receive a set of arrows that look like this, you're going to have to attach some of these. They sent them with the points, like they didn't just like send completely pointless arrows. But I'm going to have to screw them all on. And they literally do, that's it, they screw on. But, shout out, they got some nice little barred feather fletchings on them in that lovely shield shape, and then threaded them, so I don't have to worry about the fletchings cutting into my arrow rest, which is nice. Slap them in this, also Mandarin Duck quiver. I've got a huge haul. It was really, really snazzy. You can skip this bit. Yeah, go on. Oh wait, no, I have to do it. I'll edit it in post and skip it. Let's go. All right, I've got some arrows. I've got a bow. Let's make some holes and stuff. Once you've got it set up, then you can move on to the best bit, which is the actual shooting arrows. This is going to be up to you. You're going to have to spend some time on it, learn to use the bow. This is not a bow that I use a lot, so it's taken a little while. But yeah, these something like this is going to be great for experimenting with. It's going to be great for finding your feet, great for learning, and it doesn't cost too much. So when you come to figure out what it is that you actually want from a bow, then you can look at the fancier stuff. And in the meantime, this will do you well for target archery. And while it has some limitations in terms of how you can shoot arrows from it, you can still experiment with some unusual styles, a bit of speed draw, some side shots, a spot of larsing around, and maybe the occasional trick shot. So if you're looking for a beginner bow, you could begin by looking at something like this. And if you're particularly after one of these, check out the link in bio. But most importantly, get something you like and enjoy it.